Om Tat Sat. Welcome to Gyan Bhakti. We are currently exploring the scripture Mysticism of Ramayana. Commentaries by my Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananji Maharaj, narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. We are currently on Lanka Kand and we were studying the episode of Hanumanji going to get Sanjeevani booty for Lakshmana. So let's continue on the mystical meaning. This colorful episode of the Ramayana conveys the amazing powers of devotion in an aspirant. Hanuman, because of his spiritual purity and intense devotion, was able to cross the ocean, uproot a huge mountain, and carry it back in his arms to Rama. Bharata, because of his equally perfect devotion, had acquired the superhuman power to have sent Hanuman along with the mountain flying back to Rama on a single one of his arrows. When such devotion is coupled with divine grace, then there are no hurdles too great for an aspirant to overcome. There is a popular legend relating to this portion of the Ramayana that also poignantly illustrates the immense power of devotion or bhakti. If you recall from Aranyakand, when Rama and Lakshmana were traveling through the forest, they had encountered Shabri, an elderly lady devotee who had been waiting to meet Rama all her life. While awaiting his arrival, she had been sweeping the forest path and picking the best fruits to offer to her lord. But before putting the fruits in her basket, Shabri had bitten into each one to be sure it was perfect. When Rama tasted those fruits, he felt that they were the most delicious thing he had ever eaten. Lakshmana, however, refused to eat them because Shabri's tooth marks were on each fruit. With disdain, he threw the fruits as he was given up into the mountains with the help of his arrows. According to the legend, it was the herbs that grew from Shabri's discarded fruits that were the only ones that could bring Lakshmana back to life when Meghnad had rendered him unconscious. So this is the power of bhakti. When a devotee is sincere and totally dedicated, that power has to bring God, and even cruel people melt in such devotion. It does take time, but eventually all things do happen in a beautiful way for a devotee. Let's move to the next episode. Kumbhakarna is destroyed by Rama. When Ravana learnt about the amazing recovery of Lakshmana, he rushed to awaken his sleeping brother Kumbhakarna and enlist his help in the battle. Of course, arousing this gigantic demon who had been sleeping for months was a momentous task. But Ravana succeeded after promising him 1,000,000 jars of wine to drink and a whole herd of buffaloes to eat. From the moment he entered the fight, Kumbhakarna exhibited his immense power and caused great harm to Rama's army. At one point, when his gigantic black body was streaming with blood from the onslaught of Rama's arrows, a huge force of monkeys and bears rushed towards him, thinking he could be quickly subdued. But Kumbhakarna roared with laughter and picked up monkeys by the thousands and thrashed them on the ground, all the while shouting, "Glory, glory to Ravana." As the monkeys and bears cried for help, Sri Rama pierced Kumbhakarna with 100 terrible arrows, which caused the demon to run around wildly, with the earth shaking under his immeasurable weight. In rage, Kumbhakarna plucked out a great mountain and started to throw it towards Rama with his gigantic arm. However, before he could release it, Rama cut off both the demon's arms. Shrieking terribly with wide opened mouth, Kumbhakarna began to devour everything in sight. Lord Rama, seeing even the gods terrified, filled the open mouth of Kumbhakarna with arrows. But still the powerful demon did not fall. Instead, he rushed towards Rama like death itself. In response, Rama cut off the head of Kumbhakarna with one arrow and with another sent that head flying towards Ravana's feet. Seeing that severed head of his younger brother, Ravana was shocked and overcome by a desire for revenge. In the meantime, the headless and armless body of Kumbhakarna continued to dance in the battlefield. Rama then cut the body into pieces, and as those pieces fell, they smashed many monkeys and bears as well as demons. Finally, a strange light emanated from the body of Kumbhakarna and entered into the mouth of Lord Rama. At this sight, gods rejoiced in the heavens and showered their praises upon Rama. The mystical meaning: Kumbhakarna is a symbol of tamas or inertia, the darkness and inertia that abides in the unpurified unconscious, and his army represents the forces of darkness: anger, hate, greed, sleep, laziness, dullness, deception, and all their numerous ramifications. In this world, tamas is the most dominating guna. It devours people by the millions day by day. Thus, Kumbhakarna is portrayed as being unimaginably huge, and his capacity to devour is boundless. Awakening Kumbhakarna implies bringing to the surface all the tamas that is hidden in the depths of the unconscious, arousing it and allowing it to be destroyed by the divine within. During sadhana, certain impurities come up to the surface quickly, but others, like Kumbhakarna, require a lot of effort to awaken. Bringing mental impurities before the penetrating light of the intellect is not always a pleasant task for an aspirant. Before one begins to practice reflection and meditation, he may not be aware of the mass of tamasic impurity that dwells in the unconscious. But through spiritual practice, this impurity comes to the surface, and facing it may be supremely frustrating. And many people give up meditation. They get scared. They think, why are these thoughts coming up? Although that is a natural progress, that is a sign that they are progressing and they should continue to march on with faith. The spiritual project of awakening tamas is much like becoming a good housekeeper. If one has been accustomed to living in a dark, dingy home, he won't notice all the dust and cobwebs that have collected under the rugs, on the ceiling, in the corners. But when one begins to take pride in purity and cleanliness, and he makes his effort, he brings brighter and more cheerful lighting into his home, and he begins to see the dirt he had previously ignored. Now every speck becomes visible. This should not bring frustration, but simply a persistent eagerness to clean things up and keep them that way. It takes constant effort. Similarly, in the early stages of sadhana, the power of intellect is less. So all the impurities in the mind are not observed. But when the power of intellect increases, all defects are brought into the spotlight. This is a healthy sign that one is becoming more sensitive on the spiritual path and should be welcomed, not with frustration, but with great joy. Although it's not easy, but if you are a advanced sadhak and you are persistent in your effort, it will become easier and easier. Next episode, Death of Meghanad. In order to ease his father's grief over the loss of Kumbhakarna, Meghanada, also known as Indrajit, approached Ravana bragging, "Tomorrow, father, I am going to show my valor to you. I have received a magical chariot from my presiding deity, and nobody can vanquish that chariot." Thus the next morning, Meghanad, riding in that magical chariot, rode forth to meet Rama's troops, laughing all the while in a way which struck great fear in the heart of the monkeys and bears. With immense pride and arrogance, Meghanada then discharged a special weapon that caused everyone in the battlefield, including Rama, to be tied up by snakes. The only one left unbound was a great bear, Jambavan, whom Meghanad considered too old to pose any problems for him. That was a great mistake in judgment, however, because Jambavan immediately caught hold of the foot of Meghnad and hurled that arrogant demon all the way back to Lanka, rendering him unconscious in the process. So while Meghnad was lying unconscious, sage Narada sent the mystic bird Garuda from the heavenly world to devour those snakes which were imprisoning Rama and his army. After their release, the monkey and the bears quickly renewed their assault upon Lanka. So we will continue this satsang in tomorrow's episode. We will explore in more detail. This is Swami Nikhilananda. Om Tat Sat.